All right, so here is our format, okay? So this is kind of going with the video that I did the other day, but now we're actually I'm going to walk you through it with the content we just did. All right, so we said that we always plan, I said, not we yet. I said we always plan using what? What kind of structure do I say that when we start, this is how we plan, using a what? A T-chart. So I'm going to draw my T-chart. Okay? Now, what my T-chart represents are my body paragraphs. So whether you're doing something for me that is 2 body paragraphs, or you go to college and you have to write a 15-page paper, this format can be blown up from whatever it is now into whatever you need. Okay? So this is going to be, I'm going to label the stuff now, and whatever other notes you need to write, you can write down. But when we usually do this, I won't write all these like spots. Okay, so on the left side is body paragraph number 1. The other side is body paragraph number 2. Easy, right? Within each body paragraph, how many chunks do I require? 2. So I'm going to divide that in half again. So now what I have is I have chunk 1 and chunk 2 of each body paragraph. All right, what did I say goes in each chunk? Nope. Yep, and? Yep, so this is embedded text plus justification, and I will show you exactly what that means. In our planning, we're only going to put the text. The justification, we don't have time to write on here as well. We will write it in our paper, right? But that's where our annotations come in handy, okay? All right, so I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to show you how I plan. So for me, for years, I've always known that it's been very hard for me to say, this is what I want to prove. Now let me go find all the things that prove it. Because what happens a lot is you will say, here's what I want to prove, and then you'll go and go, oh, there's nothing to prove that. And then you're kind of in this like circle of, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't find anything. So what we do is we work our way backwards and we find what evidence we have liked in our annotations. This is where our annotations come in handy, okay? So we said, all else fails, we figure out where the shift is. So let's say you've read a passage and you're like, crap, I don't know what to find. You can at least start doing this initial spot where I'm going to at least break it down and organize stuff. I can at least do that, okay? So body paragraph 1 for Alfred Green, we said is going to cover what body paragraphs? 1 through what? 3. Okay. Then body paragraph number 2 is obviously going to cover paragraphs 4 through 5. With me? Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to look at our chunks. So for body paragraph 1, we have to get 2 chunks. Where would we say the first chunk would come from? What body paragraph do you think? Okay, so we're going to say this is going to come from paragraph 1. Chunk 2 is going to come somewhere between paragraphs 2 and 3. Obviously, body paragraph number 2 lays itself out very easily, right? Chunk 1 comes from from paragraph number 4. Chunk 2 comes from paragraph 5. Now at least we know where we have to find our annotations. Okay? The reason we do this is this. When the reader goes to read your essay, you have to show them and prove to them that you understand the entirety of the passage. If you only focus on the middle and the end of the passage, you haven't proven to me that you understand the whole passage. Make sense? This way, now, if you give me something from paragraph 1, something from 2 and 3, something from 4, something in 5. You've done beginning, middle, and end of the passage. As a reader, I know you understand the entirety of that passage. Okay, so that's why we organize it that way. Yes? All right. Now, notice we haven't written a thesis yet. So, look in paragraph 1. And what we're looking for is we're looking for a piece of support or evidence that is what I call high dollar. High dollar evidence means it's a piece of evidence that you can say more than one thing about. So if all you do is point out the word race, there's not much you can say about it. But if you provide for me a piece of evidence that I can say, this is the general purpose of this piece of evidence, this is the purpose of that piece of evidence for this audience, this is the purpose for this piece of evidence for this audience. Now I've said 3 or 4 things about it. That's a high dollar piece of evidence. Okay? 1 minute with somebody around you, talk about what in paragraph 1 do you think is valuable enough to talk about and have 3 or 4 sentences about. Go. All right. Talk to me. What is one piece of evidence in there that we think is high dollar? That gives you the best bang for your buck? Ashlyn, go ahead.
Whose hearts burn the love of country and freedom and a civil and religious toleration.
Okay, good. Why do you like that one so much?
Because it explains why they're it kind of gives them a purpose of why they're fighting.
Good. Okay, so I'm gonna jot down love of country, of freedom, and of civil and religious freedom. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I really like about this. One, I'm going to tell you that, oops, I don't know how I just spelled list. If you ever see a list of any kind, use that as a piece of evidence. Why? Because for a list, you could talk about what is the purpose of that list. You can then talk about the pieces of the list. And then you can also talk about the order of the list. There's 3 sentences right there that if there's a list, and I guarantee you, I don't think I've run into very many passages that don't have a list. Now, the list has repetition in it, right? So you could also in this one, and lots of times there's parallelism. Advanced syntax a lot is parallel structure as well. But with this, there's so many things in it that I think it's golden. You could also, I had another group talk about that very last one, the however prescribed when possessed of true patriotism to say, my country, right or wrong, I love thee still. So that would be a fine piece of evidence too, okay? But notice that we're letting our annotations lead us to that piece of evidence. So now let's look at paragraphs 2 and 3. we have to choose the one piece of evidence out of those two paragraphs. Now, what did we say that those two paragraphs have in common? They're both concessions. So they both start with, it is, my pen doesn't work. They both start with, it is true. So remember when we said on that chart we did the other day with the New York Times, like the common thread? Well, there's a common thread. So you could say this idea of it is true. Now, I would say out of those two paragraphs, which concession do you think is strongest? Because what you could do is you could paraphrase the other concession, right? But then use a direct quote of the one you like. Talk with a partner, talk with somebody around you. You got 1 minute, pick the best piece of evidence. Go.
The part where he says have failed to listen to recognition. That's the most powerful. The entire first or so entirety of have conceived of solitude. Big idea.
It's like pain, and then it's nothing in return.
He listens, but not that easy.
It really gives, how they pay for nothing.
Kayla, if it's easier to see there, you can move there because I know you're kind of probably at a weird angle to see. So if that's an easier spot, you can move there. All right, talk to me about evidence. What'd you find? Jace, what do we think?
So in the second paragraph, when he says the forefathers have failed to bring us into recognition as citizens, that is kind of summing up the point of 2 and 3. So that would be like the most powerful, because he's conceding to appeal to the African American audience. They're likely angry, but he's conceding to them, and he's also telling the white audience that they're what it is.
Okay, yes, I agree. But I don't think you could say more in the, so we're looking at how is it said that we could look at the different things. So what you've said is exactly right and it is valuable. But if we're looking at the language, I can't say more than what you just said about how he said it. Does that make sense? It is the most powerful because that's what he's saying in both pieces. So I think that you could paraphrase that part to lead into a piece of analysis. But here's the switch between what you do in pre-AP, and from my understanding, we didn't really write a bunch of papers in pre-AP besides STAR, right? So that's where we're going to kind of have to shift that's the hard part, is going, that's good, and you're totally right. But we're not addressing structure of language, right? What else? Noah?
We got the result of most unfair rules of judicial investigation has been the pay we have received for a solicitude since being aid and dangers and difficulties of the state that tried souls. That whole thing, obviously, what we can figure out part of that.
Okay. Yeah. So I think you could say, so I would just say, my pen keeps dying. Unfair rules. And one of the things that is hard, I think, for us when we start this is finding the right part, right? So for paragraph 4, I couldn't quote that full sentence. Do you know what I mean? That last sentence of paragraph 4, it's too much to quote. So we got to choose the little pieces. So unfair rules of judicial, so unfair rules, right? Judicial investigation, I just lost it, has been the pay we have received for our and I'm just going to stop there. I mean, we could put the rest down. What I would probably say the best part would be, because this is a list, right? List, list, and then how it ends is another list. So I would say you could talk about that and then paraphrase that first part so that you can condense the language. So the language in there is that list, right? So you could contrast that list also. Remember when we talked about that last column of like trends? Here's a trend. You can contrast the list that he starts in the beginning with the foundation with what they're actually receiving. So that would be not only the piece of analysis that you've already done, but that would be another piece of analysis to end with. Does that make sense? Yes, Kat.
If you were contrasting the initial list and the later one,
Yeah.
it'd be better to use like the one, maybe the first part of paragraph 3. If you just say,
You could. Absolutely. Yeah. You could absolutely do that too. Yeah. That's where like choosing our pieces of evidence, as long as there's language in that, right? So what Jace chose wasn't wrong. It just didn't have like the level of language in it that we want, right? But what you inferred is analysis, right? All right. So that's what I want to show you about choosing evidence. Now notice, now what we have to do is we have to go write our assertion. So for each body paragraph, we make what we call an assertion. An assertion, by definition, my definition, not by definition, my definition is an assertion is your opinion that you prove true through evidence and analysis. Okay? So if you start with something that is a fact, meaning you can take those words that you wrote in that first sentence and go point to it in the passage, that is factual. What you end up doing is you end up giving me a book report. So what a lot of people do is he uses imagery to prove his point. Factual, right? What we want to look is we want to look at the big idea. What is his purpose? What did we say was the reason for that first half? Why did we make the division? Because the top part is doing what? What did the top part before that split? So in paragraphs 1 through 3, what did they all have in common?
concession
It was a concession to what?
to the point of like America and the fact that like it's been kind of contradictory. Like it's
Okay. Okay. So here's what I'm going to go with. In the first half, there's my transition. So now as a reader, that's your first sentence, right? As a reader, I know you're breaking up your whole essay into 2 parts, the first half and the second half. Now I go, okay, I'm good. I know how to read this essay. In the first half, Green, what's a good marker verb for what he does? Because we don't want to say Green says. What does Green do? Green, what's a good marker verb? Green does what? We don't want to say says. We don't want to say explains. What's a good marker verb?
Appeals.
Appeals to who? Is he appealing?
Implies.
Implies. Implies works for me. Implies. Kat, what did you say that?
that the American ideals that the country was founded on haven't been, I guess,
That
based for
America's founding ideals don't apply to African Americans. That works. You could, or you could use that language in your text. Because I would say he doesn't necessarily concede in the first part, in the first paragraph, right? He's pointing out, like, here it is. This is what, here's this race. He doesn't concede that there's a race. He says there is a race that feels this way. And I concede that this race feels this way because of this happening, right? So you could get into that when you introduce your second piece of text. You could, yeah. I mean, so this is what we like. So when you write and you do this, if you get done and you go, well, I didn't really prove that, I proved something else, then you just go and you scratch it out and you write the new thing, right? I don't mind the scratches. The scratches show me that you're thinking, right? Don't use whiteout, don't erase, don't use pencil, scratch it out with pen. I like to see that because I go, ooh, they're thinking. That shows me a thought process, okay? All right, so now what we would do is we would go in and plan the second half as well, okay? But what I want you to see is I want you to see how our annotations led us to this planning. Does that make sense? We don't have the word diction. We don't have the word imagery. We just said, what language did we like? And let me put it into a body paragraph, okay? Then we proved, and then we looked at our assertion. What have we not written yet for our paper? Thesis. All right, so for our thesis, what are the two parts of a thesis? Concrete, abstract. Okay? What was the concrete part we said is in our prompt? Green persuades his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. What do we said moves us into the abstract? What, 3 words? Yep. So we need an abstract idea. So what a lot of kids will do here is they'll say, they'll do a couple of things for thesis. Green persuades his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces. Ta-da, that's a thesis. No, that's the prompt. That's where we go wrong. Because if that's all you said, then you haven't argued anything. What you want to look at is you want to look at this as an argument. You're analyzing an argument and you're writing an argument to prove to me what you see. The other thing that we can't say is Green persuades his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces by using diction, imagery, and appeals. Or by using ethos, logos, pathos. You're still going, ta-da, I found stuff. So now what you want to do is you want to say, what's the big idea? So look on the back of that pink packet. There are abstract ideas. So ultimately, what is he trying to prove by saying African Americans should want to join the Union forces? On the back of that pink sheet, talk with somebody next to you and identify one word in there that you think proves why he wants his fellow African Americans to do this. Ready, set, go. A lot. Video online you need to watch.
I watched that video. So yesterday we annotated the first half. Homework was to annotate the next half. Got it.
All right, what do we find? Here's what I do. I find a couple of words and I just write them out to the side. Because again, what we do is we write our thesis, and after we prove stuff, we go, is that what I proved? Oh wait, there's another word there. I could use that one instead. So what's an abstract word in there that we picked, Nick? Okay. Okay, duty, good. Quality. Anything else? What else?
Honor.
See how we're using these abstract terms, Kelsey?
Free will.
Jace?
Said temptation.
Why would you say temptation?
Because he calls to action to resist the temptation to like turn your back on
Okay.
temptations principle.
Cool. Kat?
Patriotism.
Yep. Okay, I ran out of room. So notice what we have now is we have a list of these abstract ideas that we can just plug in there. Which one do you think, remember, your assertion says how or why the abstract idea is true, right? So if Green says, man, our founding ideals, they're not really holding truth for us. Why does he believe that? Because of what abstract idea do you think would fit? Okay, because of equality. So if another one fits with you, then fine, right? So Green persuades his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces in order to, we need another marker verb there, in order to achieve you could say ultimate equality or true equality. I like true equality. Period. There's your thesis. That's it, my friends. Okay? So what you're looking at is this this quality. So now you say, why does he believe? Or how does he believe they should get equality? Or why does he believe that they should have equality? Because the founding fathers said that we should have these ideas or these freedoms, and we're free, but not all the way free. So this answered the question, why or how? We have not said any terms, diction, imagery, details, language, syntax. That hasn't gone anywhere. Question that I have a lot is, well, it says, how does he do this, right? Now we're going to write a chunk, and we're going to talk about how he does that. Okay, here goes our chunk. All right, so in our chunk, we need to embed text. We embed text by giving context to the piece of text. Follow all the text that I'm talking about. So what we look at is we look at paraphrasing what leads into the piece of evidence that we chose. You can assume that the person reading your essay has read the passage that's being covered. But you still have to tell me where you're going in. You can't just jump in and says Green says blank. That's not embedded text. You have to tell me what's happening right before it. So what I would say here is I would say Green begins his argument by pointing out, I don't like that, that's a colloquialism, by pointing out that his quote-unquote race, now I've identified to the reader that I understand what race he's talking about, right? That his race has a, quote, love of country, of freedom, and of civil and religious freedom. No, toleration, sorry. That's embedded text. That's it. If I ended up using that second piece where, however prescribed, when one possessed of true patriotism to say, I would paraphrase that he discusses like 4 main American ideals or 4 main American values. All right, out to the side. Why did we say that list is so important? So he lists, now there is where I'm talking about the language, right? As I'm talking about he lists, so that's the support or the type of evidence that I'm looking at. He lists, why does he list those things? To show what? You cannot say what we said above. So what is he doing? He lists those things, why? Okay, good. He lists the core American values to define, what'd you say, Jace?
To define his race's principles.
A common, or the common, principles shared by both African Americans and white men. Now, that is not telling me what the evidence means. It is telling me what is the purpose of that evidence. Does that make sense? Now that's only one sentence. Now we talk about, why does he start with country? Why country first in the list? So now we talk about the order of the list. Green begins with country because why? Why does country come first?
It's the most concrete example of something fish share.
Because what do you mean?
Like that's something that you can't just deny. Like,
Okay, because I mean I like your idea of because it is is the most concrete, I don't like thing. It's the most concrete Now, what I could say next is I could say, why does freedom follow country? Why does civil freedoms or civil toleration come before religious toleration? Do you see what I'm saying? Now I have 5 or 6 more sentences, 2 or 3 more sentences. So 5 or 6 total sentences about that one piece of evidence. My friends, that right there is AP Lang. Now y'all should be perfect after this. No, it's still going to be hard. Okay, so, oh no, hold on.